Administration says the strike was targeting drug trafficking. We are joined now by former associate counsel to President George W. Bush, Jamil Jaffer. Jamil, thank you so much for being here with us. It is unclear what legal authority the U.S. had to hold these prisoners. What, if anything, do you read into their release and where things stand today?
Well, look, Jessica, the real challenge here is that President Trump has laid out in his message to Congress about these strikes starting in September that his view is that these drug traffickers present a national security threat to the United States, that it's clear and imminent threat, and that he is taking action, offensive military action against these individuals. And so that was the first strike. We've now seen 6 of them. This is the first strike where people haven't been killed. All the people haven't been killed. So we were able to detain these folks. Now, under the authority the president has suggested he has as commander-in-chief to conduct airstrikes, presumably he believes that he has the authority to detain them as well. He's now, though, returning them to their home countries, Ecuador and Colombia, under the theory that they've been sort of taken out of the fight. Now, whether he's gotten some sort of agreement with the Ecuadorian governments and the Colombian governments to detain these individuals and keep them off the battlefield, that's an interesting question. We'll see what happens with that. But at the minimum, the president has made clear that that's what he thinks his authority is, which is to take offensive action against people he believes are a national security threat to the United States.
And so to that question, what legally needs to happen for that to be the case? What legal threshold do you have to meet? And do you think that the government so far has met that threshold?
Well, this is a tough question because we're in sort of unprecedented territory here. We don't have an authorization for the use of military force from Congress. We certainly don't have a declaration of war. But presidents have engaged in offensive military activity for the entire 250 years our country's been around without those authorities by identifying threats to our national security and acting in self-defense. So in this case, that's what the president says he's doing. He says, look, these drug traffickers have brought drugs into the United States. Tens of thousands of Americans a year are being killed by these drugs. Our allies have gone after these folks. They've suffered losses as well. And as a result, his view is this is a national security threat. And unless Congress acts to stop him, and we saw a vote in Congress just last week to try and stop him that failed, brought by Senator Kaine and a couple other senators. Now they're trying to force a vote on an authorization for the use of military force. We'll see if that passes or not. It's unlikely to pass. And so what we're likely to see here is the president to continue to operate under his own executive authority unless there's action taken to stop him from doing that. And that's been true of presidents for decades.
I also want to ask you about a separate issue, Ukraine and Russia. It does not appear, as of yesterday, that President Trump will give Ukraine the American long-range Tomahawk missiles that President Zelensky has been seeking, that Trump had said he might give Zelensky if Putin didn't come to the table, that if he didn't do and if he didn't end this war. Do you think that's the right choice at this moment?
Well, look, Jessica, I've long been a believer in giving Ukraine everything they can have, everything we have in our arsenal to win this fight. I've said that since the Biden administration. President Biden did give them some weapons, but he leaked them in slowly over time, making it impossible for Ukraine to win. President Trump then cut that back in an effort to force Putin and Zelensky to the table. That failed because Putin doubled down after multiple meetings with President Trump. And so now the question is, how can President Trump get Vladimir Putin back to the table? Some of us thought that what he would do, and in fact what he said he might do, was to double down in Ukraine, give them everything they needed, but he appears to have, at least in this instance, walked that back. He's not going to give them the Tomahawk land attack missiles, which are very long-range, very serious weapons, some of the best weapons we have in the U.S. military from the early 90s, but still very effective. And so we'll see what happens with this over time. He's scheduled to meet with President Putin again in Hungary. We'll see if that conversation goes the way the last one did, which is President Putin makes promises he doesn't live up to. If he keeps doing that, I think President Trump has learned the lesson from both Putin and Xi. You can't trust him, and he may need to double down in Ukraine, and that may be the time he sends these Tomahawk missiles over.
Right. And it is, as we were saying in our last hour, it is this question of when you have the leverage, but you have to use the leverage to get Putin to do what you want him to do.
No, that's exactly right. And, President Trump talks about how he's the greatest deal maker. Well, this is a scenario where he's talked about getting this war ended even before he took office. He hasn't been able to get that done. He's clearly frustrated with the situation. He's clearly frustrated with Vladimir Putin. And so the question is, when will that frustration turn into him doing something to double down on Ukraine and give them what they need to force Putin to the table, which is to cause more casualties in Russia?
And, Jamil, we do have a little bit of breaking news I want to ask you about. The U.S. State Department is saying it has some credible reports indicating an imminent ceasefire violation by Hamas against Palestinians in Gaza. The State Department has gone on to say in this new statement that this planned attack against Palestinian civilians would constitute a direct and grave violation of the ceasefire agreement and undermine the significant progress achieved through mediation efforts. The guarantors demand Hamas uphold its obligations under the ceasefire terms. So again, this just coming in, the U.S. State Department saying it has credible reports indicating an imminent ceasefire violation by Hamas. I just want to get your reaction to that.
Well, look, obviously, President Trump has been very clear. If either side violates the ceasefire, it could result in serious consequences. The biggest concern has always been that Hamas wouldn't uphold its end. It hasn't fully done its part. It hasn't handed over all the dead bodies of Israeli hostages that it said it would. And now if it's going to conduct some sort of an attack or is planning an attack, that demonstrates a couple of things. One, it demonstrates that we or the Israelis have insights into what Hamas is planning. And number two, demonstrates that President Trump isn't willing to let this just go by, wait for the attack to happen. He's making clear to Hamas, we know what you're doing. Don't do it. And if you do, there will be a lot of pain. And surely Prime Minister Netanyahu is ready to take action if he needs to. The question is, will the U.S. back it? It sounds like the answer to that is yes. So we'll see what Hamas does now.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that these would be against the Palestinian people themselves. So we will certainly keep an eye on that breaking news. Jamil Jaffer, always good to see you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Jessica.
Still ahead, we are